By the spring of 1945, the world Hermann Göring had helped build was collapsing with astonishing speed. Cities burned, command structures fractured, and loyalty dissolved into fear. The Third Reich, once presented as eternal, was now unraveling day by day. Yet even as Allied armies closed in, Göring clung to the symbols of power that had defined his rise, symbols he would soon destroy himself, setting in motion a final, desperate act whose consequences would haunt his family for decades. In late April, as Soviet forces advanced toward Berlin, Göring issued an extraordinary order. His grand estate, Herrenhall, hidden deep within the Schorfheide forest, was to be obliterated. This was no military necessity. It was an act of denial, denying the victors the spectacle of his wealth, denying history the physical evidence of his excess. Explosives were planted, artworks were removed or hidden. Then the estate was reduced to rubble, vanishing in smoke and fire, as if Göring believed erasing the setting could somehow erase the story that had unfolded there. While Herrenhall burned, Emmy Göring and her young daughter Edda were already fleeing south. The carefully choreographed life of privilege was replaced by hurried convoys and guarded lodgings. Bavaria became a corridor of retreat, crowded with officials, families, and servants who once ruled Germany from palaces and ministries. The Alpine refuges near Berchtesgaden, imagined as last sanctuaries, now felt less like fortresses and more like holding pens for a defeated elite waiting for the inevitable. For 7-year-old Edda, the journey was bewildering. The servants were gone, the rituals were gone. The certainty that had framed her childhood dissolved into whispered conversations and locked doors. Adults spoke in fragments, avoiding questions they could no longer answer. And behind it all loomed the unspoken truth. The Reich had fallen, and no one knew what would happen to those who bore its most infamous names. On the 6th of May 1945 the end arrived with brutal clarity. Near Radstadt, Austria, Hermann Göring surrendered to United States forces. He arrived not as a hunted fugitive, but dressed carefully, surrounded by trunks of personal belongings and attempt to control even his own defeat. News of his capture spread rapidly through Allied channels, and within hours attention turned to his family. Emmy and Edda were located soon after, taken into custody not as criminals, but as dependents of one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany. They were placed in guarded holding facilities, former hotels, and requisitioned houses now stripped of comfort and freedom. The rooms were clean, the guards professional, but the message was unmistakable: the Görings were no longer untouchable. For the first time in over a decade, they existed without servants, without privilege, without protection. Each meal was rationed, each movement was observed. The world that had once bent around their name now closed in on them with quiet, bureaucratic finality. And yet, even as Germany surrendered unconditionally and the war in Europe officially ended, something far more unsettling was beginning. Because this was not merely the collapse of a regime, it was the opening chapter of a reckoning that would not end with armies or treaties. What awaited the Göring family next was not revenge, but judgment, not chaos, but procedure. And at its center stood a courtroom that would force the world to confront crimes so vast they defied comprehension. Before we go further into that courtroom where history itself would be put on trial, take a moment to *** subscribe and like this video ***. It helps more people discover stories like this, where the war doesn't end with victory, but with consequences that echo through generations. In November 1945, the ancient city of Nuremberg became the stage for something unprecedented. Inside its palace of justice, the victors of World War II assembled not to negotiate peace, but to put history itself on trial. At the center of that courtroom sat Hermann Göring, once the Reichsmarshal, now prisoner number 1. He appeared confident, alert, even defiant, as if the collapse of the regime had not fully penetrated his sense of self. And for a moment, it seemed he believed he could still control the narrative. Göring quickly emerged as the most dominant defendant. He sparred with prosecutors, corrected translators, and attempted to recast himself as a statesman who had merely served his country. He denied knowledge of mass murder, minimized his role in persecution, and presented the Third Reich as a misunderstood experiment crushed by its enemies. Observers noted how often other defendants looked to him for cues how the old hierarchy briefly reasserted itself inside the dock, even as the world watched, transfixed and uneasy. While Göring fought for his legacy in public, his family remained isolated in silence. Göring was held under Allied supervision, subjected to repeated interrogations that focused less on crimes than on proximity, how much she had seen, what she had benefited from, what she had chosen not to question. Direct contact with her husband was forbidden. News arrived late, filtered through guards and officials. For young Edda, the absence was total. Her father had vanished behind walls she could not imagine, and no one could explain why. Outside the courtroom, the trial reshaped global understanding of the war. Evidence was displayed with relentless precision: documents, films, testimonies that revealed industrialized murder and deliberate aggression. Each day stripped away another layer of denial. Göring's confidence faltered, then hardened. He adjusted tactics, sensing that persuasion was failing. What remained was performance, a final attempt to shape how history would remember him. On the 1st of October 1946, after nearly a year of testimony, the verdicts were read. The courtroom fell silent as Göring was found guilty on all major counts: conspiracy, crimes against peace, war crimes, crimes against humanity. The sentence was death by hanging. For a brief moment, witnesses described a flicker of shock crossing his face, quickly masked, but unmistakable. The man who had once imagined himself Hitler's successor was now condemned as a criminal of history. Less than 2 weeks later, on the night of the 15th of October 1946, Hermann Göring escaped the gallows. In his prison cell, he bit down on a concealed cyanide capsule, dying within minutes. How he obtained it remains debated: smuggled, hidden, overlooked, but its impact was immediate. The execution scheduled for dawn never took place. Göring had chosen his own ending, denying the Allies the spectacle of his public death. For Emmy, the news arrived like a rupture. There was no final meeting, no farewell, no explanation she could offer her daughter. 8-year-old Edda asked where her father had gone. No answer could bridge the gap between a child's memory and the weight of global judgment. The suicide closed Göring's chapter, but it intensified everything left behind: grief, disbelief, and a legacy now frozen in infamy. In the weeks that followed, Allied authorities moved swiftly to dismantle what remained of Göring's material world. His vast art collection, assembled through confiscation and theft, was seized, cataloged, and scattered for restitution. Jewelry, furniture, personal effects were stripped away as evidence and compensation. Each item became a fragment of proof, transforming former symbols of power into silent witnesses of a fallen empire. And yet, even as justice seemed complete, another process was quietly beginning, one that would not end with a verdict or a cell door. Because while Hermann Göring was dead, his name was not. And in post-war Germany, the question was no longer how to punish the architects of the Reich, but how to live among the ruins they left behind. When the war ended and the trials concluded, Germany did not return to normality. It entered a long, uneasy aftermath. Ruins still lined the streets, but a deeper reckoning was underway, quieter and more personal. This was the era of **Denazification, an attempt to cleanse a shattered society of those who had enabled, benefited from, or symbolized the Third Reich. For Emmy Göring, the widow of its most notorious figurehead, the war was far from over. Her punishment would not be delivered by rope or firing squad, but by law, stigma, and exile from public life. Unlike many spouses of Nazi leaders who had remained largely invisible, Emmy Göring had been a constant presence during the regime's rise. A former actress, she had embraced the ceremonial role assigned to her, attending state functions, hosting dignitaries, appearing beside her husband in carefully staged displays of prestige. Investigators now argued that her visibility mattered. She had not signed orders or commanded troops, but she had helped normalize the regime's power, lending it cultural legitimacy at home and abroad. In early 1947, Emmy was summoned before a Denazification tribunal in Munich. The proceedings were methodical, almost bureaucratic, yet the stakes were enormous. Prosecutors cataloged her privileges, the estates, the art, the servants, the access to Hitler himself. Emmy countered that she had been swept along by circumstances, insisting she was politically naive, a private individual thrust unwillingly into public life. She denied knowledge of atrocities and portrayed herself as a wife, not an accomplice. The tribunal was unconvinced. In March 1948, the judgment was delivered. Emmy Göring was classified as a **Belasty** major offender. The sentence stripped her of nearly everything that remained. All property rights were revoked. She was barred from public employment, denied pensions, restricted in travel, and excluded from cultural institutions. Appeals softened some conditions, but the core ruling stood. The name Göring was now a legal burden as much as a moral one. Financial survival became a daily concern. Gone were the estates and entourages. Emmy relied on the quiet support of friends from her pre-war theatrical life, living modestly in a society eager to forget people like her. She faded from public view, but she did not disappear entirely. Decades later, in *1967**, she published a memoir that stunned many readers not with contrition, but with defiance. She portrayed Hermann Göring as generous, misunderstood, even compassionate. The crimes proven at Nuremberg were dismissed or rationalized. She never revised her view. This refusal to reckon fully with the past placed Emmy in a growing divide within post-war Germany, between those who confronted history and those who reshaped it to survive. To some, she was a relic of denial. To others, a reminder of how deeply the regime had embedded itself in ordinary lives. Either way, her judgment was complete. The law had spoken, even if conscience had not. Throughout these years, Edda Göring watched silently from the margins. Her childhood had been dismantled piece by piece, first by war, then by trials, then by social exclusion. At an age when identity begins to form, hers was already burdened by history. Classmates whispered, doors closed quietly. The question she could not escape was simple and impossible. ***, who was she, without the father the world condemned? ***. Before we follow Edda into adulthood and confront the final legacy of the Göring name, take a moment to ***, like this video and subscribe to the channel ***. It's a small action that helps these deeply human stories reach more people and ensures history is remembered, not simplified. Edda Göring entered the world in June 1938 as a symbol of triumph. Her birth was celebrated across Nazi Germany, announced in newspapers, marked by gifts from party elites. Adolf Hitler himself became her godfather. At Hall, she grew up surrounded by art, ceremony, and attention. Nicknamed the Little Princess of the Reich, her earliest memories were shaped by luxury and unquestioned belonging, by a world that told her she was special before she was old enough to understand why. That world collapsed when she was 7 years old. The abrupt transition from forests and estates to guarded rooms and rationed meals left no space for gradual understanding. One day she had a father who commanded armies and aircraft. The next, he was gone, locked away behind walls she would never see inside. When news came of his death in October 1946, it arrived stripped of context, reduced to an absence no adult could adequately explain to a child. After Emmy's trial, mother and daughter returned to Munich to begin a life defined by caution and distance. Edda attended school under a name that carried weight long after the war ended. Teachers were careful, classmates were curious or cruel. Silence became a form of survival. In a Germany attempting to rebuild itself morally as well as physically, the daughter of Hermann Göring did not fit easily into narratives of renewal. As an adult, Edda pursued an education, studying law before training as a medical technical assistant. Her life unfolded quietly, deliberately away from public attention. She never married, she never changed her name. Unlike many children of Nazi leaders who chose anonymity or reinvention, Edda remained growing openly, defiantly. It was not forgetfulness that shaped her adulthood, but loyalty. In rare interviews given decades later, Edda spoke not of crimes or ideology, but of childhood memories. She described her father as gentle, affectionate, devoted to her happiness. The historical record the looting, the terror, the deaths was rejected outright. To Edda, those accounts belonged to a different world, one that had nothing to do with the man who read her stories and held her hand. This refusal to reconcile private memory with public fact placed her at odds with historians, survivors, and much of post-war Germany. Yet her position revealed something deeply human. History does not arrive in families as footnotes and verdicts. It arrives as faces, voices, absences. For Edda, accepting the full truth of Hermann Göring would have meant losing him twice, once to death, and once to moral condemnation. She chose instead to preserve the version of him that had shaped her earliest years, even as the world judged her for it. When Edda Göring died in December 2018, obituaries did not speak of reconciliation or closure. They spoke of persistence, of a life lived under a name that could neither be escaped nor redeemed. Her story did not resolve the contradictions of history, it embodied them. She stood as a reminder that the end of a war does not end its consequences, and that justice delivered in courtrooms cannot untangle every human bond it touches. World War II ended in 1945. For the Göring family, its shadow stretched across generations through loss, denial, memory, and the quiet persistence of a legacy history refused to release.